Well, hello everyone. I wanted to share with you a video today about why I converted all of my dendrobiums to either bark or moss media. I did that last spring, and I really wasn't aware that I didn't tell you all that I had converted all of them to moss or bark. And so I got several questions a few weeks ago when I was talking about which orchids I recommend for water culture. I think several of you were surprised that I had gone ahead and converted all of them to either New Zealand sphagnum moss or into orchiata bark. So I thought I'd kind of go over some statistics with you all today, some things that I just kind of learned about growing dendrobiums in water culture and the reasons why they're now in moss and bark. I actually did the numbers on this, and when I had my dendrobiums in water culture, they were doing fine. But when they bloomed, there weren't very many blooms per spike. So one of my dendrobiums that had been growing in bark all the time, I had received it in bark and it had always been growing in bark. It bloomed this time last year, and it had this stunning display of about a dozen flowers on one spike, and I thought, wow, that is really impressive. About that same time, I was having some difficulties with some of them because moss kept growing all over the roots, just suddenly. Quite a few of them had moss growing on them all of a sudden. And of course, that set up a situation where I had a lot of mold, and I thought, this cannot be good for this dendrobium. So the ones that had moss that started growing on them, I don't know how that happened. They must have been in a bark moss mix before I received them. But anyhow, instead of continually trying to clean that moss off, which it would not clean off, I thought, let's just go with it. Let's just put the ones that have moss growing on them to begin with into some New Zealand sphagnum moss. And then when I did that, I saw those dendrobiums just take off with growth. So I had some extra orchiata bark from some of my Phalaenopsis repottings. I tried that with the rest of my collection after seeing that one dendrobium spike so beautifully in bark. And sure enough, those took off as well. I also had problems with one of these that got stuck in its pot while it was in water culture. And I practically had to rip the roots away from the ceramic pot. I thought, oh, I don't want to do that again. So I went ahead and placed it in bark, and soon after that, it actually spiked and bloomed for me. So I sat down today and I crunched the numbers, and I said, okay, how many of my plants bloomed in water culture? How many blooms were on each spike? And how have they done in comparison to the bark and moss media? And what I found was really kind of surprising. Twice as many have bloomed for me in moss or bark media, and also the spikes have had at least twice as many blooms. So that speaks to me. I figure that if they're that happy in the moss and in the bark, then that is the way that I want to grow them. And now here's the question. What do I recommend to you all as far as growing dendrobiums in water culture? I've heard from several of you all that you came to the same conclusion as me, that they do much better in bark or moss. Then I've heard from several of you who have said, oh no, ours are doing just great in water culture. What I suggest you do is, if they're doing really well in water culture and you're having the success that you want in water culture, I would leave them in water culture. It's so important for you to be happy with your growing methods, and that's going to be different than anyone else's. And I've also had several of you ask me, do you prefer bark to moss for your dendrobiums? I have noticed that they do equally well. They do very, very well in the New Zealand sphagnum moss, and they do very well in the small or medium-sized orchiata bark. They both bloom about the same. So I like both media for my dendrobiums. And also let me show you how I have these set up so that they don't topple over. These are very top heavy. So I grow them in ceramic pots, and I haven't had any problems with them tipping over, but these pots are quite heavy. And then I have my Burana Jade Fantasy number 9 that I just showed you that's in bloom. I have it in this very large outer decorative pot so it doesn't topple over. That's a thing that you have to keep in mind, especially when you're growing them in water culture, is putting them in a container that is substantial enough so that they don't tip over, especially while they're blooming. So I hope you all just have a wonderful day. Thanks again for watching, and you all be highly favored, deeply loved, and greatly blessed. And we'll talk to you all next time.